Hello, and welcome back to another episode. I really thought this week I was going to be able to get away with wearing short sleeves like I said I might be able to last week. But of course, it being Indiana, the weather just drops immediately. Like 2 days before, it was like 68, like in the 60s, and it was amazing. But, of course, again, Indiana weather, get your hopes up, and then it crushes your dreams. Anyway, I want to start off by saying I called it. I said the IU women were going to come through and win the Big Ten Conference Championship, and they did. They went up in West Lafayette, and they took care of business. This week is the Big Ten Men's Conference Championships, and the day it starts, just like last week, distance is happening while I'm recording. So you guys are probably viewing this right before Friday finals, or maybe after, depending on what time you're viewing. We're also going to look at some more college basketball games. I'm also going to look at the rankings as well for the AP poll this week, because I found some of the rankings rather intriguing. And, of course, we're going to have Travel or Not at the end of the episode. All right, let's first start off by congratulating the IU women on their victory in the conference championship. It was really close up until the end between Ohio State, Michigan, and IU. IU, I think going into Saturday, from what I remember, they were third going in. All three, Michigan, Ohio State, and IU, were within 100 points of each other. It was insane. Ohio State had one of their relays DQ'd, and that was the 200-free relay. IU had their 4 medley get disqualified as well. And because of these DQs, it ended up coming down to the very last relay on Saturday. So it was the last swim by all the teams. It was between Ohio State and IU. Michigan, though, they won the event, but they weren't able to get more, even though they won the event, they still weren't able to win the meet. All IU needed to do to win the meet at that point was to beat out Ohio State, and they beat them out by a little more than a second. IU's time for the 4 free relay was 3:11:37. Ohio State went 3:12:70. All right, so now on to the men. There are a few important things to note when it comes to the men's Big Tens. It's in Columbus. So for Ohio State, that's kind of in their favor. It's their home pool. IU has a very deep roster going into this meet. It's headed by Brendan Burns. Thirdly, Ohio State is going into this meet with the Big Ten Men's Swimmer of the Week, Nathan Hotley. I think that's, I don't know, don't quote me on that. And Big Freshman of the Week, Henry Dvorak. Wow, names are hard. After watching the women's meet, so this is the last thing. After the women's meet, I would not underestimate Michigan going into this one, as the women were close and they kind of surprised IU and Ohio State, I think. So they could be a dark horse here for the men as well. And I think it's partially because when you look back at the dual meets, Michigan competed against IU and Ohio State back to back. Michigan hosted IU on Friday, I believe, a couple months ago, and then drove to Columbus that same day right after they had competed, and then they swam in Columbus against Ohio State. So those scores, I think, might be a little skewed, and I think that's what's throwing people off when they're trying to predict these meets. But to be honest, I think IU is going to run away with this one, though, for the men. They have so much depth, and they have great upperclassmen in Brendan Burns and Rafael Miroslav that have just been absolutely dominant all year long. Finn Brooks can swim any stroke and be top 3, or sprint any stroke and be top 3. The depth of IU breaststroke events will also be unmatched, from senior Jason Yep to freshman Toby Barnett. And honestly, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I could go on and on and on, but I really think that the IU could run away with this one. I mean, we have also seen some meet scoring records be broken by other conferences. Like, I think for the men's SEC, Florida had like a record high of points at the end of the meet. Like, it was the most points scored in the meet, like in the SEC championships history. And I think it was also the same thing with the ACC with Virginia as well for the women. So I think this time we're going to see it with the men's Big Ten, possibly. Okay. Before we move to the 3 basketball games that like we're going to really dive deep into, I really want to talk about the AP poll because I think some of these rankings are a little skewed and in my opinion, it's kind of a joke. So for this week's AP poll, we have Houston at 1, Purdue at 2, UConn at 3, Tennessee at 4, Marquette 5, Arizona at 6, Kansas at 7, Iowa State at 8, North Carolina at 9, Duke rounding out that top 10. Then you've got Auburn at 11, Creighton at 12, Illinois at 13, Bama at 14, Baylor at 15, Kentucky at 16, St. Mary's of California at 17, South Carolina at 18. Then you've got Washington State at 19, San Diego State at 20. And then for the last 5, you've got Dayton at 21, Utah State at 22, Gonzaga at 23, Florida at 24th, and South Florida rounding out the top 25. To be fair, most of my issues are with like the top 10 teams, like and where they're placed. I feel like they could be interchanged or even moved out of the top 10. So to start, Houston at 1, in my mind, is the only thing that really makes sense out of the top 10. They beat quality teams last week. They didn't lose, so I think them moving up over Purdue and UConn makes sense because both of those teams lost to at least one opponent last week. Purdue at number 2 makes absolutely no sense to me, though. They lost to Ohio State at the beginning of the week. And then after crushing Rutgers, they had a close game with Michigan. And Ohio State and Michigan, like the brackets for the Big Ten came out today, and both Ohio State and Michigan were towards the back of the bracket, which means that they're 2 of the not as good Big Ten teams. And Big Ten this year is kind of weak. So I think that win over the fact that it was that close and Purdue being considered the number 1 team and probably going to be national champions. Although, I mean, they've said this for like the past 3 years now with Purdue, where it's like, oh, they're going to be the national champions. They're ranked super high, but then they flop immediately as soon as March happens. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, no, it just makes no sense to me. I get UConn moving down. They really got slapped up by Creighton, but Creighton is a high-quality opponent. They're ranked, unlike Ohio State was with the Purdue's loss. So I think them moving down like 2 spots is fine. Honestly, I would have kept UConn at 2 instead of Purdue. But I would have either had them above Purdue or I would have had them below Tennessee. And I think Tennessee, going into Tennessee, I think they should be moved up more. Speaking of Tennessee, they won both of their games. They crushed a pretty quality Texas A&M team. Texas A&M has kind of been in and out of the rankings this whole year. I think because of their wins, though, I would have put them above UConn. I do like Marquette where they're at, but Arizona and Kansas, I would switch them up a little bit. Even though Kansas only played 1 game last week, Arizona always seems to crumble whenever the rankings come out. Like if they're higher than top 5, they'll do a post or whatever, and they'll be like top 5, and then they'll lose like the next game. And I mean, it's kind of ironic and funny, but at the same time, because I like Arizona, I hate to see it. So yeah, it drives me crazy all the time. Iowa State at 8, I think is solid. After Iowa State, I think the AP poll did a fine job. Duke maybe shouldn't be in the top 10. They've had some weird losses, but still. You probably could honestly put Iowa State up a little higher maybe. But, Iowa State has been kind of an underdog this whole year, so I'm not sure if they really want to be up too far. All right, so now for the 3 games. So the first one I want to look at is the Arizona-Washington State game. And this is the game that Arizona lost last week, right after the AP poll announcements happened the week prior. Arizona had a slightly higher percentage than Washington State in the field. They were shooting from 44.8% versus Washington State's 41.9%. But Washington State had more attempts in the paint, which tells me they weren't afraid to take risks in the paint. Whenever they had an opportunity, if there's an open shot, even maybe a couple contested shots, they were going to go for it. They were not playing soft. Washington State also had the edge from behind the three-point line. They were shooting from 33.3% versus Arizona's 27.8%. Something to note with the three-point line, or the 3 points percentage, is that, or actually just the 3 points, they both tried the same amount of times. They both shot 18 three-pointers. Arizona made 5 and Washington State made 6. So the three-point line didn't really make too much of a difference. But because of how close the game was, it was good that for Washington State to have that extra three-point shot made. Despite Arizona having more free throw opportunities, Washington State scored more from behind the line. Arizona had 27 shots from behind the line, but only made 17. Washington State made 19 of their 24 shots. So that 2 points could have also been a difference maker for Washington State getting the win over Arizona. They were both even on rebounds. Arizona had one more defensive rebound, though, which led them to having one more rebound total. Arizona also dominated on the defensive side of the ball. They had 4 blocks and 6 steals. Washington State had 3 blocks and 2 steals, but Arizona had 11 turnovers versus Washington State's 9. And I think looking at the blocks and steals and the turnovers, I think is important, especially for a team like Arizona, because that tells me that they have stuff figured out on the defensive end. They're a very good defensive team, but they're having a tough time putting it together scoring. They're having a very difficult time scoring. And you can't do that. And that's where the 11 turnovers come in, because that means that they may be out of sync. They might accidentally throw it out of bounds, making stupid mistakes, whatever it is. That's what the turnovers indicate. And this match was important to go over because it's probably what the Pac-12 championship is going to look like this year. These two teams have been the most dominant in the Pac-12 so far. We'll see what happens in the Pac-12 tourney, which is coming up soon. But don't be surprised to see these two teams in the Pac-12 championship game. The next game I want to look at is St. John's versus Creighton. Creighton had just come off a big win against UConn days before, and they were looking to go into St. John's territory and win, but they came up pretty short. St. John's had dominated the first half, outscoring the Blue Jays 41-28, and that pretty much set the tone for the rest of the game. St. John's was almost 10% more efficient from the field, 47.2% versus 39.7%, so about 7-8% difference there. Creighton did have a slightly better three-point shooting percentage, but with merely 8 shots from the three-point line, 25% versus 23.1%. Creighton had 3 times more threes made than St. John's, despite the percentage shown here. St. John's also made all of their free throws, but neither team shot more than 12. So I think that's good for both of those teams, that in the sense that they're not going to be fouling a lot. They're good at controlling themselves. Creighton had 12 shots and made 10. St. John's had 10 shots and made 10. The defense was kind of split, though. St. John's had more steals. They had 6 steals versus Creighton's 1 steal, but Creighton had 9 blocks versus St. John's 8. This game is very important for St. John's because they're kind of on the bottom half of the conference right now in the Big East standings. And if they want to make it to March Madness, they have to keep winning, especially in the conference tournament, which, again, is coming up very soon. The last game I want to talk about, and this one was Tuesday night, is BYU versus Kansas. BYU won that game 76-68 at Allen Fieldhouse, which is where Kansas plays. Kansas had a slight edge after the first half, leading 35-29, but then BYU launched a campaign in the second half to come back and win, and they outscored Kansas 47-33 in that half. Now, last week, we kind of talked about Kansas a little bit with the Kansas-Oklahoma game. And what I said there was that Kansas performs great in the first half of their games, and in order for them to win those games, they pretty much just have to hold on in the second half. Sometimes there's like unicorn games where that's not the case. We saw this happen when Kansas led a second half comeback against IU earlier in the season at IU. But lately, this has been the trend of the Jayhawks lately. So there are a few reasons why Kansas lost this game in my eyes. Firstly, BYU was on fire from behind the three-point line. They were shooting almost 40%. They shot 38.2%, whereas Kansas was only shooting from 20% from behind the three-point line. BYU also made 10 more threes than Kansas did, which is huge. That's 30 points right there, just from the three-point line. They shot 13 threes. Kansas only made 3 threes. Secondly, the free throws. Kansas had 31 opportunities from behind the three-point line, or the free throw line. Wow. While BYU only had 24. Both these teams made 19 shots, which tells me that BYU is better from behind the free throw line. They're more efficient there. This is also something that I talked about last week with this Kansas team. They need to be better from behind the free throw line if they want to stay winning and hold on to their leads. And lastly, from the field, both teams were pretty even, and I would think that Kansas would have had a stronger presence in the field in comparison to BYU just because of their style of play. However, they only made 1 more shot from behind the field, or from the field, than BYU did. They made 23. BYU made 22 shots from the field. They had more shots taken in the field than BYU did as well, leading to BYU having a slightly higher field goal percentage. And when I mean slight, I mean slight. BYU had a 39.3% their percentage versus Kansas's 39. So there's only a 0.3% difference. This is a pretty important game because both these teams are in the top upper half of their conference. They're both probably going to make it into the Madness in March. And with the conference tournaments coming up next week, it will be interesting to see where these two teams finish there. Yeah, no, there was a lot of talk about the conference championships this week. But next week, we will talk about that more. All right. Now I've got travel or nah. I'm pulling up the timer right now. But I found a new compilation. This one is from By Beard. And it was made 11 months ago. So it's kind of recent, I guess. Okay, 1 sec. All right, here we go. This first game is Miami versus Boston.
Wait, hold on. Dribble. 1, 2, 3. Come on, what am I doing?
Oh, this is Jimmy Butler. 1, 2, 3. I'm not sure if that was a travel.
3 seconds. Step back by Harden.
Because I think you're allowed to take 3. Oh, there's another. Okay, so this next game was Utah versus Houston. and James Harden does his normal, his step back where he takes his like 4 steps. Yeah, 4 steps. You can't do that. All right, now this one is Cleveland versus the Timberwolves. LeBron does. Oh my God, wow. He like traveled and double dribbled at the same time there. Wow, okay. All right, this one is the Magic versus, I cannot really see what uniform that is. Oh, it's Dallas. All right, but I think he did travel there. Hold on, let's go back and look again. They have like a little graphic of hopscotch. This one's kind of an old game because it's Dirk. Yeah, no, they have hopscotch there. He took like 5 steps, so that was definitely a travel. That was 4 steps there. LA Clippers versus Brooklyn. That was an easy 4 steps. You can't do that.
Got away with it, and Steve Nash goes right up to
Gather 1,
2, 3, 4. Oh my!
Oh, we saw this clip already. This was Washington versus Detroit. This is where John Wall decided to walk under the basket. Oh, that was 4 steps. This was Boston versus Brooklyn. Jason Tatum took 4 steps. Oh, we saw this one already with the Klay Thompson travel. Portland versus Golden State. I still think it's funny that he missed the shot even after all that. All right, this next game is the Lakers versus, I think, Houston. Yes, that's Houston. I think LeBron might have traveled.
LeBron gets away with about 2 steps extra.
Yeah, that was a travel.
Also on this Cleveland roster.
All right, this one is Cleveland versus Miami.
Inside, Perkins slips to the rim.
Oh no, we've got an ad. No. Okay, now we're back. Bro took 9 steps before he passed the ball. All right, this one is Phoenix versus Golden State. Hold on, I want to go back and look at that again. Oh, Steph Curry did the James Harden step back. So that was a big travel there. He took 4 steps. Luka Doncic just did the same thing against Cleveland just now. The little step back.
Yeah, he's just a season.
All right, this one is Atlanta versus Miami.
Offensively for Miami, it has been the
Was there a travel? Oh yeah, that was big travel. And I think double dribble too. Because Trae Young was dribbling, then he stopped dribbling, took like 3 steps, then started dribbling again. All right, this one's Charlotte versus the Celtics. Oh my God, this one guy, he like pretended to flop. All right, so he like pretended to flop, and then when he didn't hear the whistle, he kept going up for the shot. In the process, he took 5 steps. That poor defender, he had no idea what to do. All right, this one is the Knicks versus Cleveland. Hold on. Oh, and that's time. I didn't quite make it to the last one. So we'll save the Cleveland versus Knicks for next time. Yeah, I think it was another LeBron James travel because I feel like I see a lot of those. Okay. That is all for this week. Let next week we're gonna go into more of the conference championships. I'm gonna bring 2 people on for this. We're just gonna be discussing the conference championship brackets, Big 10, Pac-12, Big 12, Big East, like all those. We're gonna make our predictions next week. And because of that, so there's not gonna be Travel or Nah next week because of this, because this is, I imagine the predictions will take the entire time. 'Cause I mean, there is a lot of teams and a lot of brackets to go through. Just wait till March. It's going to be chaotic when we have to go through the March Madness bracket. No, there's no other special announcements that I have besides me bringing 2 guests on and Travel or Nah not happening next week because of that. So, yeah, I'll see you guys all next week. Peace out.